Hi everyone and welcome to Impact. We got a great new week ahead of us and we have many interesting topics and guests. But before we get to that, I always want to mention to you that we here at Impact love to hear from you. We want to hear your comments, your questions, your suggestions, or maybe you'd like to be a guest on Impact. You can contact us by email at impact@proctors.org, impact@proctors.org, or go to Facebook and like us on Facebook. Go to Impact Show on Facebook and click on like. Well, I'm Nick Barbie, your host. We got a great new week ahead of us, so stay tuned and we'll get on with the show. Our first segment is with Philip Morris, our host. He'll be interviewing Mark Fleischer. Mark is the producing artistic director of the Adirondack Theater Festival. And Mark is very good at what he does, and if you ever wondered about what does it take to become a theater director, or what does a director do, you'll like this one. So let's watch.
Welcome to Impact. I'm Philip Morris, CEO of Proctors and the interviewer for today's art segment. Our guest today is Mark Fleischer, the producing artistic director at the Adirondack Theater Festival in beautiful, and I mean it, beautiful, downtown Glens Falls. Mark, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a delight. And what the heck is a producing artistic director? Most people don't get what the words mean.
I think the history of ATF would actually help that, because I took over for two beloved founders, Martha Banta and David Turner. And David was the producing director, and Martha was the artistic director. And when they chose to, the theater reached 13, and it was time for them to move back towards New York and focus on their careers there, which are doing very well, the board decided that they would combine the two positions. Some board members joke that this way they only see me arguing with myself as opposed to David and Martha arguing with each other at board meetings. So basically I'm over the administrative side and the artistic side. So in the off season I'm working on marketing and fundraising as well as season planning. And then when it comes to the summer, I'm hiring the artistic staff. I direct one or two pieces a year. So it's really, I've found a niche, and it's what I did before at my other theater in Texas. That I have a sense of the marketing and that sort of side, but I also really love being in the rehearsal room.
So what brought you to Glens Falls?
The job. I had been in Chicago. I went to the graduate school, the theater school at DePaul, and I had spent a summer interning at the O'Neill Theater Center, the Playwrights Conference, because I developed a real love for new plays. And when I went back to Chicago, I was actually drawing a circle around Chicago, looking for how far outside the city I could get to start a summer theater that did new work that then fed back into the city. And then I opened Art Search, our illustrious trade want ads, through Theater Communications Group, and saw summer theater, upstate New York, committed to new works.
That's a circle around Chicago.
Yeah, well, so I threw my hat in the ring, and it was like the first thing I applied for out of grad school. Because partly I was freelancing in Chicago and hated it. I hate the freelance life. The idea of trying to chase down work more than, and I was teaching and I was, assisting and I was, but I'd run a theater before in Texas and I really liked that idea of being part of a community. And so when I came to Glens Falls, I did a first interview in New York City with a panel of, they had a great search process. They had artists and board members and community members all interview me, and then I came up for a visit of 3 finalists. And then Dave King, who was our board president, said, I want to talk to you about this opportunity. You want to come to Glens Falls? So I came, and I have found an incredible community. I have found one of the most beautiful places in the world. I mean, being 2 exits, south of the Adirondacks, and a small town. What I love about being there is I know my audience. I love standing in the lobby. I love talking with people about the shows. And so when I pick shows, and we're an organization that does, push the envelope for what you shouldn't expect the shows we do in Glens Falls, most people say. But I love that because I know them. A friend of mine says you should love an audience like your parents and hate them like your parents. And I think that's what we do. We push them, we pull them, we hug them. And I get to walk down the street and see people and see the impact immediately.
Our joke is, wouldn't it be a great job if there was no audience?
I don't feel that way at all. I don't feel that way at all. And it's funny because I deal with people, artists all the time that are like, oh, the audience. That's why they pay our paycheck. It's why we're there. And we want them involved. One of the things I brought from Chicago, I was working at Steppenwolf as an artistic associate. I'd been hired by their associate artistic director to lead post-show discussions after every performance. Steppenwolf Theater Company does a post-show after every performance. And it was a great gig because I really got to know their audience, and they were an incredibly smart audience. And so when I came here, I started that. So after every performance, I walk down to the front of the stage. I sit there. Either an artist joins me or it's just me, and we talk about the play. That I kind of describe it as negotiating a shared meaning for that experience we've just had as a group.
Yeah, that's really very cool. So talk some more about that. Every show, that's a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah, I mean, but we also only run for 6 weeks, and so I'm there every night, and I'm in the lobby. It's when we see our audience. But I go down and I sit down there, and we kind of just talk about themes and ideas. I mean, I really have tried to make these conversations not about how do those actors learn all those lines, but I kind of believe, I do believe that theater is about a conversation. That a player has a question or a writer has a question. They start writing dialogue, which is conversation. We go into the rehearsal room. And we have conversations about what does this character want, what do they do, how do we best represent it physically on stage, and then we do the show, and then an audience sees it. And I think the only way to complete that conversation loop is let the audience actually talk back. And so we get out there and I say, what do you think the show was about? What do you think the playwright was trying to say? And we try to, so when it's a play that exists, we do it that way. And then we also do a lot of new work, and that's even more like, what do you think they're trying to say? How effective were they trying to say? And our writers actually sit on stage and listen to these comments. I do tell writers they don't have to defend anything they've written. They should just say thank you for the note. And it's, people laugh about those conversations with new plays because I'm very much, as soon as an audience member starts to say a prescriptive, like, you should write, I go, no. We're not here to tell them what to do. We're just telling them how we saw it. So it's been a fun sort of experience. And audience members still come up to me on the street, go, I was thinking about that play the other night, and and so to me, I think we have to find more as what we do than turning the lights out on somebody for a couple hours.
Yeah. Relevance is what the work needs to
relevance.
Have.
One of the words I do with my board as we talk about shows is what's urgent about the show. What is urgent about the show today? And that doesn't mean it has to be about today. I mean, I know
right.
Many shows running in New York are set other times, and they reflect something. So, I stumbled into new work when I went to grad school. Before it was classics, and I did classics as, how do I describe this in my resume? Classics as culturally relevant pieces. So I would do a show like Ibsen's Ghosts, which is about syphilis and dogma, but I would do it and explore issues of HIV and what was happening in the late 80s, early 90s.
Last weekend I saw The Columnist, and I expected a great performance, and it certainly was. But I also was surprised at how touching a 1960s story that was about a personality that you knew but almost didn't like, even as a 57-year-old. I didn't like this guy. But wow, it was fantastic. And you really do see time differently, the times differently, and it has a connection to where you are today. You go, wow, that's how a person who is gay, who was a columnist, who was who was blackmailed, handles a whole bunch of stuff, and it was really cool.
Well, and I think that's where our roots come, in theater. I used to teach theater history, and I used to love the Greeks. I mean, no one does Greeks anymore, and you can't, because a friend of mine said the minute we put a roof on the theater, the Greeks didn't make sense because they're so big. But I mean, that's a culture that took prisoners out of jail to go to see the plays, because the plays taught us our shared cultural values, our shared history. And I think the theater is one of the last places where we still do that. I mean, cinema can do it to some extent, but there's something about that live element where we can look at a play like The Columnist about a previous era and see where are the connections. Or, like you said, walk a mile in those shoes. I mean, I'm interested in shows that don't necessarily, that whole reflect the mirror, the Shakespeare quote, that holds the mirror up to nature, but I want shows that show me someone I don't know.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because our audiences are hard to bring in of the diversity of the work that we're trying to present. It's not an easy matter. So you talk about a shared culture, but in fact, the statistics don't bear out that effort. So talk about it. What are we missing? Why don't we have a more shared responsibility or sense of participation than we would like?
That's a good question. I think in general, we're not just fighting an audience, but we're fighting a time period in which entertainment is on demand. There was a survey done of what would you like to do on a night off, and the number one answer is get a good night's sleep. So I think the audiences that do come, I debate this often. As we've been talking about different shows at ATF, someone will read a book they've never heard of. They'll watch a TV show they've never seen. They'll watch a movie they've never seen. But the play, the musical, to walk in seems to be, and I don't know if that's price. I don't know if that's just the effort it takes. I mean, let's be honest. You got to book a ticket in advance. Got to find out. You got to go out. So I don't know what it is about coming to the theater, but I think we have to provide that variety of experience, which I know you do so well at Proctors in terms of so many, because there's different people to find different things. I love serious ideas on stage, but I also this week just was in New York and saw One Man, Two Governors, which is nothing but silly. Yeah, I mean, and and that's fun. But there is something in that show, right? It's exploring a music hall. And how does that, and 1963. And so there is an idea in there. I don't think we have to be so highbrow about what we do. I think at the end of the day, people want to be entertained, and it's defining what that entertainment is. I don't mind crying for my entertainment. I don't mind laughing for my entertainment.
Well, I was stunned when I saw Mountaintop, which I adored. And as you know, it was a play about Martin Luther King. And it was one of the first times, even though I've been to many, many performances, that I was the only white person in the room. And I sat watching this going, why? This is an American story. Where are the white people? Which often I'm in the other side of the story going, this is an American story. Where are the Latinos? Where is the African Americans? And now here's a room and there's no Caucasians.
Right. I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I could get in trouble in these comments, but is there cynicism in producers? As we look at, I grew up in the regional theater model in Dallas, Texas, under Adrian Hall and then Richard Hamburger and these people, and those theaters, and I do it now. We think of slots, as we're programming a season, and I think it sounds very cynical. We're like, oh, here's our African American slot. Now we're going to look at this play by Jose Rivera and make it, But you're right. How do we get that American experience in the room? And I don't know. I mean, we've got the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. No, not Cat. We have the Streetcar now running with an all African American cast. But what's that audience makeup? We have Clybourne Park running, which is a fascinating discussion.
Play.
I know that I think
another Steppenwolf.
Right, another Steppenwolf. But it's trying to do that. So I don't know. I think that answer of. We've all been chasing that diversity of audience. I live in a community, though, that is not that diverse, as I look at the numbers. So to me, I'm looking at diversity of ideas, diversity of styles, and willing to have a conversation about what it means to live today, the way we live now. I mean, I talk about that, why don't you do, we have this kind of unwritten rule, we only do shows that are 5 years or younger or new plays. And people are like, why don't you do the old ones? I said, well, I'm more interested in, how we live now and what those are. And I don't mean it as facetious as it sounds, but to the nostalgically looking at the past. They have their place, and I'm the person that goes, what do you want in your theater? I mean, I do this with audience members all the time. Why did you do that show that was so serious or darker or had some 4-letter words in it? And I'll be like, well, what do you want out of a theater experience? And I'll find them a theater. I think there's nothing wrong with that sort of, where they're going. We have a luxury. We're a 300-seat theater. We only do 8 or 9 performances of each show, and I hope that I can find 2,000 people who like what I like. So at the end of the day, much like youth programming, I program shows I want to see and be a part of. And at some point, if that diverges, then it's my time to move on to another organization. I mean, that's the risk they took in hiring me.
Right. So tell me about coming to the Adirondacks, or coming to the northern part of the capital region, or whatever. What are the surprises? Good or bad?
Good or bad. I always tell the story. So my first trip here, for a while I was commuting from Chicago. My contract actually initially said you only have to be in Glens Falls 1 week a month in the off season, then full time. And then it quickly became clear that I needed to be there a lot more, and so that's what I was doing. But my first trip there, I had these people I wanted to see. I wanted to meet Rick Davidson's of Davidson Brothers Brewer, because he had been a sponsor since the beginning, Red Fox Books, which was the independent bookstore in town. And I met with a bunch of other people, but I couldn't get to those two, just for whatever reason. So on my way out of town the last day, I went to this diner to have breakfast, and there both of those people were. I called Dave Turner and said, I can't believe this. He goes, well, we're really excited you like that, because they interviewed a lot of people, and I hadn't thought this through, that had run from their small towns. And they couldn't figure out why they wanted to go back to a small town. You have to like that part of it. And again, I live not far from the theater in downtown. I walk into the Rock Hill Bakehouse and I have my cup of coffee and Beth says hello to me, and I like being known. And so I like that part of it. Whether it's being in Rotary, whether it's being, it's that smaller town. So I think I see an impact. The surprise in the last couple of years, at first you were surprised that I've been there 5 summers. It's my nature. The first 3 years was put my nose to the grindstone and not look up. not really get out. It's only been the last couple of years that I've gotten out and discovered what else is here. You know, having directed Superior Donors at Cap Rep, working for Mike Mills and doing the Clifford tour that's coming. So I've discovered another community, and now I'm trying to figure out how to integrate that into a model that has traditionally been cast in New York, rehearse in New York, bring the show up. And I think that's still going to be a major part of our model, but I also feel a responsibility to feeding the community that's feeding me, as it were, and finding more collaborations, whether it's working with WHAM on the and MOPCO on the 24-hour play project. You know, I love that. And that's what I was needing as an individual, because I'd moved into Glens Falls and I was the only guy running a theater. I was the only artist.
Right.
And it gets very lonely. You know, my general manager, who's wonderful, Tracy, is, you know, she's been a stage manager, but she gets tired as I come out and go, what about this play? What about this show? And she's trying to balance the books. So finding colleagues and friends, so whether it's Maggie at Cap Rep or, you know, Tim Duggan and these people, has been great. I think that's been the great surprise.
Huh, interesting. Do you have a sense, I've always talked about this region having the oddity, and I think unlike almost any place I can think of being a suburb surrounded by cities rather than a city surrounded by suburbs.
Well, they're all very independent communities.
Right.
You know, Glens Falls, and there's that kind of home team mentality. Like,
right.
You know, so I'm like, you know, 2 exits up from Saratoga, right? But there's this real separation. Now we're starting to see a little more mixing as Glens Falls is, you know, renovated as Main Street, and Saratoga gets a little more crowded. People seem to be being a little more fluid. But you're right, we are real independent towns. You know, but because what the other thing that surprised me, I guess, in my little town, I grew up in a town of Plano, Texas, 250,000 people, and
good art scene.
Yeah, but Plano didn't have it growing up. They didn't have a theater until we didn't build a theater from the city. Well, I ran a small little one that was called the Art Center. It was 160 seats, and then the city worked with us to renovate a gym, but that wasn't until 2002. Right, so a friend of mine was there, said that Plano cared about its roads more than its soul. And now I'm in Glens Falls of 14,500, and there's probably more cultural activity density. We have, you know, the Hyde Collection, which is an amazing museum. We have the theater. We have us. We have the smallest town in America with a professional symphony. We have the Chapman Historical Society. We have a World Awareness Children's Art Museum. I mean, it's just fascinating to me to see this sort of, you know, Metroland a few years ago called it the unexpected arts mecca. And it is neat to see a town that does care about that side and represents that soul building aspect of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So what do you want to have happen in the next 5 years? Where would you like to see yourself, ATF, the region?
Well, I think you know, I think my first job here was to stabilize and make sure I understood the market, and you know, I'm an artistic director who doesn't believe in that that scorched earth policy that we see so often. Someone comes in, so and I took over ATF because I liked ATF. I liked the mission, so I held on to the mission. So in 5 years, I'd like to see us grow with larger productions. I'd love to see us have a longer season. Right now, we do everything really intense, and I know that's, you know, my other joke has been that. We take the best time of the year in the Adirondacks and tell you to come sit in the dark. You know, so how do we spread it out? Because if you're seeing our main season, which is 5 events, you know, 3 shows, a reading, and a cabaret, that happens over 6 weeks. That's at the theater every other, you know, almost every other night in some ways for some people. So I'm hoping we can grow that. I would also like to see us continue to foster the new play development in a larger sense. We've had lots of discussions about a winter, I call it the Playwrights Ski Lodge. You know, could we invite playwrights up to be like a winter version of the O'Neill? But a lot of that's finding that sort of support and getting, you know, out of that best kept secret mentality, which, you know, everyone likes to say we have, but it's time to let the secret out. So getting that more regional. We're lucky that 83 to 86% of my audience is year-round resident, which means I have a lot of room to grow in terms of attracting that tourist crowd that floods into Lake George every year.
Wow, that's just all terrific. Mark, thank you for being with us. Mark Fleischer, producing artistic director of ATF. Go check out their website. Fabulous season this year. One of my favorite new musicals. The Next to Normal will be on that season. Thank you for joining us here at Impact. I'm Philip Morris. Thank you, Mark Fleischer.
Thank you.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.